My name is Markus Kalliola, as presented. Thank you for having me here today. I'm sorry you cannot speak French. I speak a bit, but not as fluently, so that I could present my presentation to you. So, I worked for the Finnish Innovation Fund, has been working there for more than 7 years now. Before that, I worked for the European Commission. Actually started setting up the primary use of health data services at the time from 2013 to 16. I also worked with Michel Tonnet there in the background when you were working for the Ministry of Health. So I think it was important times also regarding the European health data space. But thanks so much for having me, and let's dive directly into the topic then. First of all, I think it's a very timely... How do I change the slides? Okay, from there. It's a very timely time to discuss the European health data space. The regulation was voted in the Parliament and in the Council this spring and will enter into force later this year. So these same kind of events are held at the moment all around Europe. Lately, last week in Rome, in a HIMSS conference, there were in almost all the sessions the European health data space was discussed. So this is a very timely topic, European-wise, probably the most discussed legislation at the moment in the health sector. Natalie already gave a good presentation on the legislation, so I will not repeat the message. But in a very shortly, to put in context also the TEHDAS Joint Action 1 and 2, it focuses on the Chapter 4, the secondary use of health data. So as heard, the primary use of health data is discussed in the Chapter 2. It gives the rights for the European citizens to access their data. And when traveling, if you, for example, forget your medications at home, you can walk to any pharmacy in Europe in the future, and you can get your medication based on the prescription made at home electronically for you. Also, if you enter into accident in a foreign country in EU, your data can be used for your health treatments in the future very easily. The Chapter 3 is perhaps the less discussed of the whole regulation. It places new requirements for the vendors who are placing EHR systems and wellness applications into the EU markets. So it's an internal market regulation, and the EHR systems need to be interoperable in the future using electronic health record exchange format. So the Chapter 4 is the main topic of my presentation, and as Natalie was explaining to you, it concerns how the data that is collected about all of us in hospitals, in primary care, wherever, can be used for research, innovation, policy-making purposes. A bit on the transition timelines, because this is also important considering the project that I will speak to you. The entry into force is not set in stone yet, so the regulation is currently being translated in the European Parliament to all the languages, and some corrections are being made. So it will be approved in a package with other legislations that are being translated by the next Parliament. So the Parliament members are now being chosen, and then they will approve in the fall the regulations, the corrections that are being made, and the regulation then will be published in the official journal maybe in October. Then a few weeks later, it enters into force. Now, from that day when it enters into force, the implementation timelines will be calculated. The most importantly, the first in green, the implementing acts. So those are the technical specifications and guidelines for the member state on how to actually put the operations in place on their member state. Then, at the 4 years' time, the primary use of health data, secondary use. And after 6 years, the more complex cases in the primary use, the more sensitive data on the secondary use, and also the EHR systems. And after 10 years, for example, how the European health data space is interlinking with the non-European countries such as UK and US. So I will speak to you today about the TEHDAS project, which is on green there, and the TEHDAS 2. But there are a lot of other initiatives that are quite important for setting up the European health data space. At the moment, there's a pilot called Health Data at EU, which is coordinated by the French Health Data Hub, so a French organization. There's a lot of countries involved in that as well. And then the Quantum that you can see on the screen is developing a data quality and utility label, which is also mentioned in the ESDS regulation. The ones on blue are focusing on genomic data, so they are building genomic data infrastructure to Europe. And then the UK is for cancer imaging, and the Darwin EU is a project by the European Medical Agency on how to use data on a federated manner in EU. Now, if you put that then onto the context of the regulation, you see when the Commission published the proposal for the ESDS, it was in the middle of the TEHDAS project that you can see there. And then when it enters into force, it's the end of this year, and then adapted into 2 years, and then the implementation becomes 4 years, 6 years, and 10 years, as I explained. But it's good to put in perspective so you can see where the different projects are and when the legislation becomes binding. So my organization and myself, we coordinated the TEHDAS joint action. So what is the joint action is? It is a very specific financial tool by the European Union to invest into specific health purposes. So the European Union sets up these joint actions each year. There's a number of them. They each have a very specific focus. So for example, it could be tobacco prevention or some other health policy reason. So this TEHDAS was set in place to improve the secondary use of health data. And then the next TEHDAS joint action also focuses on that. So just to keep in mind that it's a very specific way of the European Union to finance. They choose the topics. They also send a letter to each member state to designate which organization participates in the project. So the consortium, very often in European projects, they select their own partners. But in joint action, we don't select each other. The member state designate. So the member state in Finland, the Ministry of Health, they designated the Finnish Innovation Fund to participate in this. And other countries do the same. So in France, it was the Ministry of Health. They designated themselves, and the French Health Data Hub. So then each country does the same. It's a voluntary project. But it's quite powerful because the member state give the right for certain organizations to represent their country solving these very specific issues. So in the first joint action TEHDAS, we had 25 European countries participating. It started in February 2021 and ended last summer. We had 4 million of funding, 60% came from the European Union and 40% from the member states. The main purpose of this joint action was to help the European Commission and the member state to develop the concept for the secondary use of health data. So when you see the timeline, this was started before the regulation was published, so we gave ideas for the Commission on what to put in the regulation. So that was the main reason why the project was there. It was to shape the European Health Data Space regulation. We worked on these different topics, so how the governance would be put in place, what kind of data quality features need to be in the regulation, what should be in the regulation, what can be left for the member states to improve the data quality, what kind of infrastructure is needed to exchange the data between the member states, but also how to manage it securely, how the citizens would be engaged, how to use this new concept that was actually defined in the Data Governance Act, data altruism, how that should work in the health sector. And then how to make all that sustainable. So those were the main topics. And of course, I cannot go through all the proposals that we made in that 2 years project, but they are achievable on the tehdas.eu website. All the documents that we made are published there. And a lot of the recommendations that we made went into the regulation. I took some highlights of some of our work, which I found interesting. One thing was interesting, we made a study of what are the current barriers of health data use. We made read a lot of scientific papers and analyzed them, and then we interviewed a lot of experts in EU, in different countries. And then we collected all the barriers that we could find, and then we put them into different categories. Now, often when you hear about people talking about data, it's very technical. So people think that to solve the data problems, we need more IT systems, or we need more interoperability between the systems, or it starts from the technical point of view. But this study revealed that from the 11 categories, 6 were legal. So actually the legal issues were the main concern for researchers in Europe of why it was so difficult to work together. Now those legal issues cannot be solved without regulation, so that's why the European Health Data Space is so important, because it now harmonizes the way that we use data for the secondary purposes. So each country in the future, we have the similar processes for dealing with that. Of course, data and semantics were also mentioned, and the interoperability. One category was linked to infrastructure, and then one to trust. Other interesting products that we did, we visited different countries physically, spent many days there, and then assessed the country's readiness for the ESDS, and also how they are managing their secondaries of health data. There's one example, of course, you cannot read it on the screen. I just took screenshots that you sort of see what kind of studies we made. So there were 13 country visits, and we assessed how they are using data on the secondary use purposes, what kind of regulations they have, what kind of resources they have, what problems they have, and how ready they are for the future European Health Data Space. Unfortunately, I don't have a study from France, because France was not there, was not voluntary for this study at the time. There were 13 countries who were. It's pretty difficult to change the slides. I need to tap to the right place. All right. So I think this was quite interesting that we did the first architecture picture of the European Health Data Space 6 months before the regulation was published, and most of the concept that you see in the study actually went into the regulation directly. So you can see here the different features, for example, how the permits are granted, how the data is used in secure environments, how the catalogs work. On the top, I don't think you can really read from the screen, but you can see the different steps that need to be taken by the researchers when they access the data. So on the left-hand side, you have the data discovery phase and the catalogs. Now those are in the regulation at the moment. There's the permit granting processes. Those are defined in the regulation. Then you can see the data use block there. The data in the future European Health Data Space will be placed in a secure processing environment. It means that the researcher will not be able to download the data for the computer. It will be there used for using remote connection. So each member state will need to set up these secure processing environments, and so that the researchers can then use the data from there. So that was defined in our proposal, and then how the research will be published. So basically the whole process of using data was defined in this study. One interesting topic as well was the survey we made for citizens. Now, of course, there's quite a lot of findings from that survey, but I found this quotation quite interesting. So we got more than 6,000 replies, and one of the key results from the study was that the more people know about the health data use, the less they fear, and the less they know, the more they fear. So I think this is the case also for many other policies in general, but I think it applies also to the secondary use. Whenever you talk to people, some might be very afraid of the data use, but when you talk to them, they don't actually understand it that much. But then when people start understanding, they fear less. So I think it's a lesson learned also for member states how to make communication out of the regulation here in Toulouse, but also in Paris or wherever you go in France. So we need to really communicate clearly what are the benefits and how the data is used and why. Let's go now to the second joint action. So the previous one ended already last summer. So now the new one started 1st of May this year, so a month ago. The budget is a bit bigger. We have 6 million euros, and we have 30 countries involved. Now my organization is again coordinating this joint action. The main focus of this new regulation, or this new joint action, is to have harmonized implementation of the European Health Data Space. Now, often you have a regulation, and then member states start implementing it, and they go on their own ways. For example, in the GDPR, we had a lot of different interpretation on the GDPR. So we try to avoid that by giving the member states clear guidance and technical specifications. For example, how to define your data, how to make it findable, how to make the data permits, how to harmonize the forms that the researchers need to fill in each country, and so on. What are the specifications for secure processing environments? So we need to have the harmonized implementation. So that's why the TEHDAS 2 project is focusing on giving this guidance to the member states and reduce the fragmentation. And it's for the secondary use purposes only. Here are the topics that we are working. So the data discoverability, the first phase, the data need to be findable. So we are focusing there on creating, for example, the specifications for the catalogs. Now each area is led by different countries, so Sweden and Belgium are responsible of this area. Access to data, it means different kind of forms to be filled and another part of the data access process, how to define the minimum data sets and so on. This is led by Finland and the Netherlands. On the safe and secure processing, we will define how the pseudonymization, anonymization, and safe processing environments will be made. There, the responsibility lies on Germany and France to lead the work. Of course, all the 30 countries participate in the work, but these are the countries who take the lead. On the serving citizens, the importance of this action has actually rose since the regulation was published, because there's the opt-out principle, and the member state need guidance also how to implement that harmoniously around Europe. So that is led by Austria and Cyprus. On the engagement work package, there's again France. It's France and Denmark in this work. There's quite interesting studies coming out from that work package, for example, or that thematic area, for example, how the fees and penalties are set for the data use, and how the collaboration with the international other countries beyond EU will be managed. And then Finland coordinates this joint action and manages the communication side, and Croatia is doing the evaluation. So I have a few slides left regarding the specific thematic areas, but how am I with the time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay,
Yes.
then that's enough. So here are a bit more specifically on how we are working with the TEHDAS joint action. And sorry about the Norwegian flag, it was there. I have a couple of slides there with I had the presentation for Norwegian colleagues, and they wanted to know where they work, so I placed the Norwegian flag to each place where they are actually operating as well. But that's not that important for you. All right, so in the data discovery, which is led by Sweden and Belgium, we are really defining the first step for the users. So how they find the data, how the data need to be described. There are new technical standards called DCAT AP, but that's not really important. But we need to understand how to use it, so that each member state defines their dataset in a similar manner. And when the European Commission has a master catalog of each country, then that they are interoperable, the descriptions together. Then the minimum categories and how to make the limitations on the reuse is important part that we do that as well seamlessly in the whole EU. There's one article in the regulation which states how the health data sets can be enriched after the study has been made. So when the study finishes, they might find something on the data sets that are not complete, or they complete the data sets, the researchers, so they can let know the health data access body that something can be improved, and then the information goes back to the data holder, which can then improve their original data set based on the study. And of course the technical specifications will be also done here. On the access to data, which I mentioned to you already, we give guidelines for the data holders, which are all the university hospitals, national registries, primary care facilities, and so forth, on how to make the data available. Quite interesting part of the work is how to make the actual application. So the data users, which is researchers, they need a lot of guidance on how to apply for the data. I think they have not been used in these templates that we are going to start using, so they need help in that. Also, the health data access bodies need help in creating the processes and formats for this data access. So there will be a similar process for each country, which need to be set up. So we will define this in the joint action. And then each country will need to set up the health data access body, and they need a lot of information systems. So we will give them the technical specifications to create those. The French Health Data Hub here is leading this work package with the B Farm from Germany, which is the medical agency there, and they are focusing on the technical, most technical issues on the European Health Data Space regulation. So how to link the data sets, how to create the safe processing environments, how to do the minimization and de-identification of the data. And we need a lot of infrastructure, although I said that the IT problems are not the biggest, but of course they need to be managed as well. So this is mainly done from this work package. How the data is transferred and how it's made pseudonymized and how to make it available in a safe, secure processing environments. I already mentioned that this thematic area regarding the citizens is becoming more important now with the opt-out principle. So this is part of the first study here. How to fulfill the rights towards the natural persons. We continue the work on the data altruism. Data altruism means that the citizen donates their data, so they give some additional data about themselves voluntarily, whereas the European Health Data Space is mostly focused on using the data that we already have on the different databases and electronic health records. There's also about the research outcomes, and quite interestingly, in the regulation, after the negotiations, there's a new addition that if there's a significant finding on the health of a natural person, they need to be made aware of that. So, of course, that will need to be also done here. And finally, on the engagement side, where France is also very active, this time the Ministry of Health is here from France, working with the Danish colleagues. So giving the guidelines on the fees and penalties, I think this thematic area is one of the sort of a subtle one, or a bit, it's not that easy to think on the international access and how the penalties, for example, go. So you need to be a bit, well, I don't know. It's quite hard to think about these things that nobody has done before on the European scale. So France has a lot of responsibilities on making this work package and this thematic area work. So I think that was everything from my side. I welcome you to follow our project using the tehdas.eu website and then the Tehdas X handle. And probably there will also be a LinkedIn account on this project. But also happy to answer any questions that you might have now or later in the break.